Hello, beautifuls. You are listening to Bliss and Grit. I am Brooke Thomas. Soon I'll be joined by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. This is the show where we're talking about being students on the embodied spiritual path and trying to figure out, as we go along, what does that actually mean? So what is a real, authentic, meaningful evolution of our lives? How do we embrace everything, all the stuff, all the bliss, all the grit that comes with a human life? We're attempting to sort that out for ourselves as we go along on the show. I thought this conversation would make a nice follow-up to last week's episode, where we were debating manifestation and acceptance and like getting into some talk about our feelings about law of attraction stuff. So in today's show, Vanessa was very brave and she brought up a hard challenge that she's currently up against. So something that is true for her, but also very inconvenient for her. So we're pondering, how do we navigate that pain in the ass place that happens over and over again in all of our lives? What is truth, really? And what happens when you pretend it isn't talking to you and try and stick your head in the sand? And how do we navigate what Vanessa calls our control tower thinking? So that part of ourselves, that ego self, that just wants what it wants, how it wants it right now, and then let's never change it again. Thank you very much. How do we deal with that part of ourselves? A note before we get into the conversation that we do occasionally use profanity. This conversation, if I recall when I was editing it, is pretty light on that, but just a heads up. Okay, here we go.
I feel like this week I've actually had a lot going on and there's been a lot on my mind. This is Vanessa Scotto, and Brooke, I would actually love your ear, and I would love to hear a little bit from you about, I guess, just how I can look at things, because there's been a lot up. And to catch you all up, Brooke and I did this program. It was this 5-month-long meditation program with our teacher, Reggie Ray. The lineage is called Dharma Ocean. And it's somatic meditation, as you may have heard us speak about, this embodied approach. And it's funny because our teacher promised us that if we actually embarked upon these practices, life wouldn't let us get away with things that weren't true to us, that weren't authentic. Right, Brooke?
Mm-hmm. Turns out.
Turns out he was really good for his word. So it's this really interesting thing being someone in the, practicing spirituality and spiritual practices and psychology for over 20 years, or maybe even better to say just someone who's a seeker. In that, I guess over time, my intentions for why I did what I did and what I was looking for have shifted. So some base part of me always wanted truth, but earlier on, I kind of had a projection of what I wanted truth to be. So
there's that.
I'm not sure how really truth-seeking I am. But as I've matured and evolved, and as I've found the right guides and mentors and teachers and practices, I find I really am orienting towards truth. And it's been a little bit of a head trip for me lately, because my journey to truth has, I guess, called front and center certain problems that I'm having in my life, or certain dilemmas, certain imbalances, maybe it's better to say. And so just to cut to the chase so y'all can know what I'm talking about here, I've been struggling with health issues ever since I moved to Miami, about 4 years ago. Recently, I took a month off. I traveled to different climates. I sort of dried out, so to speak, escaped the humidity to see for myself what would be the impact on my body, like a really genuine experiment. And in doing that, I learned a lot. I learned, that the energy of a place actually has a fucking impact on me. It's so annoying to admit. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, right? Like I want chaos. Like my personality wants a certain thing. I love being stimulated 24/7. And the truth I found out is that the energy of a place has a huge impact on my body. Inescapable. Body has no boundaries. And I'm actually best served by being in a really natural environment. So that's one thing I found out. The other thing I found out is my health goes to shit when I live in Miami, which is my home. And it's the place that my beloved husband, Mario, most loves and feels comfortable. So I'm in this really interesting position now, Brooke, where it's like, I am faced with truth and I have an option. I have an option to deny it, to just go on with what my personality finds easiest, with what my husband would find easiest. My parents would certainly be the most happy about, or I can follow truth and actually listen to my body and begin to make shifts. But to do that, I have to deal with a lot of my fear and psychological wounding. So it's been a really interesting time.
And as you're talking, you say the word truth. I was thinking like that really, if we describe what we mean when we use that word, it really gets at the heart of what's up. Because what's truth? Truth is often really surprising and shows us that what we thought was true is not reality, or what we hoped we wanted, or what we were goal-oriented towards isn't necessarily the way things are going to go. And that we're creating these ideas and wants out of ego and out of personality, which is fine. So I don't mean that in a shaming way. But then truth comes along and it's like, I know you're comfy here in Miami, and your sweetie's comfy in Miami, except here's this thing that makes it unworkable. And so now you have to sit with the unworkable. And truth, what that means to me is like truth is source. Truth is something other than my small personality and conditioning that has ideas about what I want and where I'm going. Truth is source coming into our lives and going, okay, accept this, and it can feel, and I'm going through some stuff too, which is a little less podcast friendly. So I'm not going to share it except to say that like those places that feel utterly airtight and unworkable, like, no, but I want what I want. And yet it also doesn't mean like, well, hey folks, like the lesson is suffering happens, so suck it up. Learn how to suffer step by step. Keep on suffering. I don't think that's true either. So it's like, how do you deal with truth when it shows up, which oftentimes presents itself as a surprising, unworkable feeling situation, and make it workable? There's workableness in truth. Like truth loves us if truth is source.
Yeah, but what do you mean by workable?
That it doesn't have to be doom and suffering, that all parties can thrive, except it often looks like creating space for new solutions to come in that weren't remotely on anyone's radar.
God, this is like my brain exploded in a million different directions as you were talking, because I have so many different, thoughts and feelings about all of this. And makes me think about when we talked about manifestation and, can we manifest things in our lives? And, it's so fascinating because God, don't we want to believe it, that we can just set some idea out into the world and like it happens.
I get what I want.
Oh my God. Like we want that control tower in our brain to be the ultimate source. But wouldn't that be so lonely? But that's what we feel safest with. And so we have this idea that if we do the right things and we do the right practices and we're good people, I can't believe I keep coming up against this like little worm of an idea, but that things will unfold in a certain way. And it's all happy, happy, joy, joy. And it's all what you expect, right? You expect to get what you expect. And when we talk about trust your life, which, you and I have been talking about for a long time, and we've mentioned to all of you on the podcast, it's like, is there a place for me to trust that this truth, that this city is not working for my body and health, is for my higher good? Is there a place for me to trust that? Like, what if somewhere in between, as you said, rather than thinking, all right, well, this is just life and life is shitty sometimes and we accept it, which I partly do believe, I guess I do grapple with that idea personally. Like, well, maybe, life's just hard sometimes and you have to deal with it, right? But then the other piece is that it's like, maybe rather than that life's hard sometimes, maybe it's the attitude that we develop, because right away, some of my wiring takes me to despair very fast. This is not, thank God, happening as much right now. My experience is a little different, which I'll tell you about, but my wiring since I'm a little bambina, and is that like I develop like mild bits of hope, like, oh, maybe I can be happy. Maybe life can work out. Maybe I can find love. Maybe da 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 da. And then something comes along and it doesn't work out. And I'm like, oh, I knew it. Life is hard. Life is this, I don't know. I'm unlovable, whatever stupid narrative spins into my brain. And I actually see this a lot with my clients. So I guess some of what's going on in my mind is like, how do we find faith? Like, how do we stay with truth and find faith that there's some rhythm, something bigger, something higher, something calling us forward, like as you used the word source, something that may be even taking us towards our highest in that truth, even if it's not what we expect and moreover, not what we want.
Totally. Because it's like if truth is source, and I believe that that's true, and if source is love, and I really believe that that's true, then it's loving us into something. It's loving us into some potential that we can't see from the smaller vantage point that we're hanging out at currently. I really feel like all of these things, and I don't say this from like a cute, comfortable place. I say it from a life that has involved plenty of suffering, as most lives do, but we all have different degrees of that. That they're trying to unburden us. They're trying to sort of midwife us into a different situation, which doesn't necessarily look like, oh, good, finally I get, my dream neighborhood and whatever, the perfect school for my son where he's literally happy and thriving every day and he never comes up against an uncomfortable personality in his classroom. And, my love relationship is completely uncomplicated and because we just have easy our lives go forward.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know why we have these fucking crazy ideas. Like,
we hold on to them for so long and they're so sneaky. We keep pretending we don't have them anymore and then up they come.
Right. It's like, no, life should be uncomplicated and straightforward in what I want because it's what I want. And it's never reality because none of us have the consistent, uncomplicated narrative. We just don't. And so it's a matter of like, how do we view the things that do come up? And like you were saying, you can have this reality come up. This city is unworkable for my body, my health. You can totally ignore that, right? Like you can pretend that's not true and continue getting sicker. And, that would have fallout in a myriad of places, right? Like maybe you start resenting stuff about your parents because they want you close by or your partner because that's where he's happiest to live, whatever. But like there's so much, I guess we're talking about karma, right? Like there's so many seeds that get sown of negativity when you turn away from your true knowing, but turning towards it, burning off karma is really hard too. It's like, no, I want it to be uncomplicated and straightforward.
Yes. I guess, yes, exactly. I guess that's kind of the thing though, is that once you see truth, there's no unseeing it.
Yeah. And the more you actually listen to the voice of your truth and don't turn away from it in the myriad of ways that we turn away from it, consciously and unconsciously, the more it just becomes like this fluent language in your being, this knowing of what truth is for you. And
years ago, sorry about that.
You go.
Years ago, I knew that Miami wasn't good for my body. And I just kept ignoring it, because of course I have wiring. I have old wounds. There's ways that I don't want to rock the boat and ways I didn't want to disappoint people and all of those different levels that drive us to kind of veil ourselves from truth. But it's funny, most often it's like the truth poked you once or twice. Like if you're really honest with yourself,
at least
this is
once
not
or twice.
like, it's not like a shocking revelation. Like, what? And I find that to be true in so many moments in my life that it's like you had a poke, you had a feeling, you had a hunch, you had a discomfort, and you just kind of ignored it or pushed it away because you just thought like, I don't want that. I don't want that discomfort. I don't want that poke. I don't want that intuition. And, it did have an effect. And our mentor, Kieran, often says that truth heals and lies hurt. And period. Which is an interesting statement to digest, right? Because we often think about like, well, there are good times to lie, white lies, or like not everybody's ready for the truth. We have a lot of things culturally that say
or
that
you'll
like,
be doing everyone a favor by turning away from what's true for you because they don't want that to be true for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't we have to be part of a community? I mean, I think actually, culturally speaking, we have a lot of ideas around like love has to be sacrifice. We have to sacrifice for people. We have to make other people happy. Like it's kind of everywhere in the collective, and it certainly exists in my own personal wiring. So, in so many ways, I deny the truth, and now the truth presents itself. And okay, I did the best I could, but I definitely stalled, and it had an impact. It's a funny thing to see. But I guess the question that's been rolling around in my head that I wanted to get your thoughts on is, do you feel like sometimes life or source will lead us towards something so we can learn a lesson? Like, do you subscribe to the idea that sometimes truths are happening and life is shifting in a way that's there to teach you a lesson?
I feel like the teach you a lesson thing, and this is something I'm totally grappling with, so it's not like I have this on lock, but I think that it's there to teach you a lesson is a part of this weird sort of like parental view that we have of the universe that's not true. Like I really feel like this idea of so for example, a simple example I've mentioned in a couple episodes, like one of the things that's up for me is money, like as a simple example, because all of us suffer with money, whether we have a bunch of it or none at all. Money is a hot topic for us all culturally. And so I can, let's say very straightforward example, I can overspend, right? Like, ooh, I shouldn't have gone on that vacation. I'm making up an example. And so now, I learned my lesson. Now I'm going to be a good girl and I'm going to impress my universal parent who is really looking down at me with furrowed eyebrows and is like, Brooke, get it together, be a good girl. And I'm like, okay, parent universe, I'm going to, dedicate this much. I'm going to take an extra job and I'm going to pay off that credit card job. It's like, good job, check box. Like that, I really have a problem with. I really don't think that it is as straightforward as that. I really do think it all comes down to these weird Christian original sin ideas. And I'm not trying to be anti-Christian at all, but this idea that we're born flawed is definitely not the way we see the world from a Buddhist viewpoint. Like that's the born whole, a reflection, one of many reflections of God is different than like impress your angry God parent who's looking down at you like, will she learn her lesson? And yet, I think that there's a developing, which is different than, are you going to be a good girl? Are you going to learn your lesson? There's a developing, like a deepening of the human experience. Like, so when I think about myself as a 13-year-old, like I was less emotionally mature by a lot. I saw the world in a different way just because I was a less mature human being. And so all of the experiences that I've moved through have given me something. They've given me more depth and awareness and appreciation of of the world. And they've given me the impetus to continue on a path of more aliveness and more awakeness. What do you think about that differentiation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we certainly grow and evolve, but even as I asked you the question, I felt like the statement was punitive, like the universe teaches us a lesson, which is funny because it's easy enough for me to think that that could be true in my head. And yet when I made that statement, I thought, oh God, these words sound totally punitive. So I think I'm resonating with what you're saying on that first point, that, there's not a parental God figure up there teaching us a lesson. And I think what makes that concept actually appeal to me, the idea that it's like almost like we're in school and we're learning, is that it's actually still hard for me to cellularly believe that the universe is benevolent, because you look around and see so much pain and suffering.
Yeah.
You look around and see so much pain and suffering. So it's like, I actually do believe it on a certain extent, but like, has it penetrated to my very core? Not fully yet, because I see the pain and suffering. And I think it's because of part B of what I was going to say. I don't know if I used 1 and 2 or A and B, but bear with me.
It's all good.
But part 2 of what I was going to say is because maybe it's just too difficult for us to sit with the mystery. In other words, can we believe that there is a benevolent universe, that there is a source that is just love? It's not trying to teach you a lesson. It's just trying to love you and like open the doors for truth, right? For us to really believe that, then we also have to understand that there's a certain bit of mystery that we can't totally get, that maybe there is personal karma that's creating pain, or cultural karma, or maybe we don't understand why a good person gets cancer, and I guess it's our little control tower egos have a hard time sitting with the mystery. So it's easier to explain it like, I'm just getting a good solid lesson by life, and now I know what to do about it, so it doesn't happen again.
Right, exactly. So it can come down to control, right? Like, I learned my lesson, so now I can keep my shit together and things will go my way because I'm going to be a good girl now. So like going back to that example I gave, that's straightforward for most of us, like, ooh, I overspent on my credit cards, bad girl. So now I'm going to be really diligent about paying them off, good girl. So if we're talking about sitting with the mystery, instead of pinging between those two extremes, both of which are fear stories about money, both. Maybe instead something completely new unfolds. If you're like, wow, this is causing me a lot of anxiety. I feel a lot of fear about money. I feel a lot of worry. I think about this a lot. Sitting with it suddenly turns into like, what is all my conditioning around money? Me personally in this lifetime. And what is our cultural conditioning around money? And is it true? And if I don't believe that all of it is true, what new things might emerge? And I really feel like those are the things, and this is stuff that I'm dealing with, not the straightforward kind of credit card example, but the money narrative. It's like, okay, so I have to hang out with this uncomfortable thing and let it tell me what it wants to tell me, which is complete. So it has some kind of unfolding in mind for me that's not attached to me being a good girl with money or me being a bad girl with money. It's like these seeds that can maybe shift I feel like everything has the potential to shift the whole way we see reality, and God, I wish I had it handy. You sent me that great Reggie Way quote this week, that this path is basically about realizing that everything we think is true isn't true, and nothing is what we think it is. So whatever it is that's up for us, needing to move from the city we live in, money stories, they all contain, like, you can follow that thread all the way to the end, no matter what the thread is. It's attached to everything, which is discovering that nothing is what we think it is.
Yeah, that's the biggest trip of all, right? I think it's so hard to understand until you start to have experiences that really open this up, right? Because ultimately, we know this from neuroscience, right? Like, we don't really see what we see. Like, we think that we're seeing everything, but we're not. Even our visual stimuli is distorted by our brain. We think things that are habitual. We have no idea all the information we're absorbing from the environment that is kind of distorting or impacting the way that we think and feel. I mean, we seem to think that we are in direct relationship with reality, so that we understand all of the variables at play. But I like what you're bringing into the conversation, which is there's so much more mystery to even a simple example. So here I am. Okay, just to make it more plain, fact, my health is struggling in Miami. And that's really all I know, right? And I may have to move, and I look at that, and these are facts. And if I don't recognize mystery, if I don't recognize that maybe I have certain filters and conditioning that could block me from seeing possibilities or block me from experiencing it as grace or as love, I can get very caught up in the why me, the fear, the logistics, the control tower thinking. But if I just expand out, I kind of like pull back farther, I could say, what if this is the perfect thing for me? What if this is the biggest act of love I could ever experience? I mean, who even knows what's in store?
This is where that, you've already said it once in this conversation, but it really does come back to me. A perfect mantra is trust your life. Like, trust it. That is hard wisdom to live, or it's at least really unfamiliar. And this is where, you and I will have conversations sometimes about like, am I a crazy person? Like, because we're not engaged with a culture that has trust in what emerges, like truth, what truths emerge so much. Like it does not take a lot to look around and see how we're conditioning fear all the time. Which isn't to say, I'm not going the Pollyanna route here where I'm like, bad things don't happen, right? Bad things do happen, pain and suffering and awful things for sure. But the fear about those things is a completely different entity. Yeah. As opposed to trusting that whatever we're experiencing is a part of our own potential for unfolding.
Right. Well chosen words. I had a client the other day tell me they're flipping through the channels and they catch Joel Osteen, the Reverend. I don't know if you've ever seen him on the TV, and they're like kind of mesmerized. He's such a good speaker, and he's saying something to the audience about how you have to have faith. You have basically two choices in life. You can live in fear, you can live in faith. And people are saying to him like, well, but what if I have faith and it doesn't work out? And he's like, just have faith. And they're like, but what if I have faith and it doesn't work out? And he said, but isn't it better to live in faith? And I guess that's like somehow what I feel about trust is like, maybe all of you are even new to this concept. Like, I've been working on trusting my life for, probably forever, but consciously for the last year or so. But maybe you're all new to this concept and how to work with it and how to be with it. And maybe the first level that we can acknowledge is like, we only as humans have a couple of options. We can cling to fantasies. You and I have both been there, done that. It is a disaster.
No, it's all worked out great for me when I've done that.
Total fucking crash and burn disaster, clinging to fantasies. We can be cynical, right? We can be like, no, life is hard and nothing's ever going to work out. But how does that feel? And where does that really get you? Because forget like all of the material things we could get in life, the successes, the love affairs, the money, everything that we can see in this material world. Forget that. All we ever want is to be happy, right? We want to feel really happy, and we want love, and we want connection. I mean, so you can be cynical, and guess what you don't feel? Super happy and at ease. And like full of love and connection. It's almost like it's a hard edge energy. So, all right, those are those two options. And we know what happens with them. The first one, by the way, the clinging to fantasy, it's a yo-yo cycle. If you all didn't know that for yourself, it's like blissfully, manically happy. And then like total despair. I knew there was nothing good about this world. So yeah, that doesn't work. So then maybe there's this like other option, and I'm sure there's a million other options, but this kind of third path that you and I can talk about here, which is trusting.
Yeah.
Just
show me.
Being
like,
open and trusting.
And just believing, like, I can't see all of the infinite universe of possibilities here. But what I know is what feels really true to me. You know, in your example, what feels true is I'm sick and my body does not thrive when I'm in this city, right?
Mm-hmm.
So show me, like, what does that mean? What are the possibilities where everyone can thrive? Not just like, you know, obviously you want everyone to thrive, right? You want your husband to thrive. You want your parents to thrive. You want your work life to thrive, all of those things. And I'm not trying to cycle around at the end here to like so in the end you will get everything you want because because there is so much nuance to the unfolding. Like who knows what stream it puts you in next? There's no moment at the end. Like I love my mom so much. And she has this tendency she'll say this phrase all the time. I just want it to be done. Whatever the done is, dinner, our day out, this stressful thing, the winter, my brother's construction project on his house. She was always waiting for it, whatever it is, to be done. And I'm always in my annoying Buddhist daughter way. I'm like, there is no done. It just keeps going. Like it just flows into the next thing, you know? But I think that if we can trust our lives and trust that we're being loved by Source when truth emerges, even when that truth feels really hard, that when we move into whatever's next, acknowledging nothing is done, when we flow into the next stream, that we bring less baggage and hardness and compression with us. And it starts to be a natural facility to feel truth and to feel love. And I am definitely in training wheels stage with this. But what I can say is that I'm starting to get a lot more clear. Like, this is what's actually true for me. This is what's actually unworkable, instead of going, oh, well, that sucks and everything. Nothing's going to work out. I go, like, that's interesting. I wonder what might emerge out of this then, if that's the way it feels to me. And I just kind of watch in a good moment.
There's yeah, right. When we're together and you're mindful. Right. I did this medicine wheel ceremony when I was in Sedona with a man who was adopted by the Lakota tribe like 25 years ago. And it was a beautiful ceremony. And just as he was talking about the ritual itself, it's kind of like it's a big giant circle. And then they have all four directions kind of built out in stones, and you walk the directions and each direction means something. And it's just really beautiful ritual. But one of the things that he was talking about as he began the ceremony is this native idea of the medicine wheel, that we are all a part of the wheel of life. Everyone, every single one of us. And that we all have to take our position in the wheel. We have to take our place in the wheel, the sacred wheel. And that if we don't all get there into that position in the wheel, it will always be kind of lopsided. It'll never be flowing. It'll never be moving smoothly. Which kind of just on some level reminded me of the idea of Buddhism and the Bodhisattva vow, and how, it's like, you don't get enlightened without trying to save everybody. Like, don't just save yourself, save everybody. But it also got me thinking about this idea around truth, because maybe feels like for me, there could be that we all have a place that is true. There is this place within us. It is ease. It is bliss. It is connection. And it is true. And I don't know where I have to live for that truth to unfold. And I don't know who I need to meet for that truth to unfold. And I don't know, what teachers I need to find. Who knows? Those examples are just examples, but maybe truth is always guiding us towards our place in the wheel.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part is that oftentimes truth can conflict with our expectations, because our expectations were conditioned, and truth is the exact opposite of conditioning. So, for example, as I said, my New York City psychology wants me around a city where I get delivery like from a snap of my fingers, and there's 20 new restaurant openings and everything's open till 4 a.m. because I am a glutton at heart, and I want. And truth is, I would actually do better living in a forest. Truth, right? And that clash between them is what makes truth uncomfortable, because I had an idea about myself, and truth is dismantling my idea about myself. And then the last thing I want to say, gosh, I just have too much to say, and this is the last big thing I want to say, but it just goes back to what you were saying, Brooke, about the collective, that sometimes what makes it very hard for us to acknowledge and live by our own truths is that we're not seeing that process reflected in society. And oftentimes in the people that we know and in our communities, we're seeing the opposite. We're experiencing a pull to be a certain way that makes everyone comfortable, like the way our identity is. They don't always want change because change is uncomfortable, even at a community level. So there's this moment I had in my life where I was at a Buddhist meditation weekend, and I was working with a teacher named Jetsun Kutchuk, very revered in the Sakya lineage of Buddhism. And I'm meditating, and I have my eyes closed, and I get a visual. And it's kind of like Yoda. It's a trip. The woman is floating cross-legged towards me, right? She's coming at me. And out of her body beams love. It's not like light. It's not exactly visual. It is like head to toe. I am being filled with love. And it is beyond. I mean, I want to cry. I'm like befuddled. And all I keep thinking is, but she doesn't even know me, and like,
awesome.
Right? Ugh. And okay, so I have this experience, and it's really powerful. Turns out someone else in the group had a very similar experience, right? What a trip. So fast forward years later, I'm actually in Miami, and I'm talking to this teacher. His name is Ram Giri. He had studied with Maharaji and knows Ram Das. He's of that lineage. And I'm talking to him, and I'm telling him this story. And I say, and the teacher, floats towards me. And I say to him, but she doesn't really float towards me, but in my mind. And he goes, why would you say that's not real? And I'm like, oh my God. And this is probably like a whole other podcast episode for us. But in that moment, I realized how often we shun the truth of our experience because it doesn't seem scientific. It doesn't seem validated by the cultural norm. And so we make it into a story. We make it into a parable or a life lesson, anything like that. But we are so taught to shun these very deep experiences that rang as true for me because it doesn't seem practical or, well, frankly, it seems like it would be judged by the masses as like, I'm having a nice trip or insanity.
Yeah. I mean, experience is so degraded in value in our culture. And this is a topic for another episode for sure. And, because I think that's something that's really up for me right now too. I'm thinking about that a lot. And I just want to, wrap up by circling back to what you were saying about we all have our place in the wheel. That's such a nice way to get out of our small individual human viewpoint and get a more topographical view, and that's when we can let go of some of our control and some of our fixed ideas. It's like, I really don't know. I don't know what might be down the road, what this might be leading me to, or what's in everyone's best interest, or how I can be the most useful to myself and to the community around me. And we all can think of things in our experiences from the past where it's like, wow, I had this really fixed idea that life was going to go this certain way. And then it didn't. And wow, I never could have known that would have landed me, in this completely other place that's actually much more fruitful for me and the world, really. Like when I think about, I had this growing up, I was always the art girl, Brooke the art girl. I was going to be an artist, the end. I went to a really great art school, which I loved. I loved making, and I had health issues growing up. And my senior year of art school at RISD, I wound up finding my way because of my own health stuff to Rolfing. And it's like, oh, it just whooshed me right into this whole other stream of career potential that I never could have seen. Never. And so if we can just see that our viewpoint is actually too small for our own good, there's so much more potential, so many more possibilities beyond our fixed ideas of how things can go.
Yeah, for sure. It's like Alan Watts once said, it all depends on the level of magnification. If you're looking really close up in a microscope and you look at the cells of a human body, you'll see war. They're like cells are eating each other and they're like bursting and dying and it looks like chaos. But if you pull all the way back, you'll see this harmonious, beautiful human being in front of you. And so having that larger perspective is definitely one of the things that I've used in my life to create a shift in the way that I'm experiencing something.
Beautiful. Thank you, sweetie. I always love talking with you.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so very much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any of the resources that we might have mentioned, they are, as always, at blissandgrit.com. So if you go to the website and scroll down, you will see today's episode in a post. You can also play with us on the social media channel of your choosing, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. We're Bliss and Grit at all of those spots. It's a very handy way to communicate with us right now, and we love hearing feedback, and we also love hearing about what's going on for you in your practice and on your path. If you want to support the show, the most bestest supportive thing you could possibly do right now would be to write us a review on iTunes in particular, or but iTunes or Stitcher are both good. iTunes has this vetting process where it likes to see a certain number of reviews before it even shows that they exist. If you're not into technology and it just baffles you, then please, if you're enjoying the show, just tell the people in your world who you think would be into it, and we would be oh so grateful. We'll be back again next week, and thank you so much again for listening.